This is Callum Ward, and these are my project submissions for Intro to Computer Science 2. For my projects, I decided for my first one to modify a lab we had done previously that involved the creation of the television class. I want to say it was Lab 8. And what I had done is I had copied and pasted over all my code to the controller.py file, hence a lot of the statistics like the min volume, max volume, min channel, and max channel, but I added in new code to connect to the view.py that I designed with PyQt, and to allow different buttons to be connecting with different parts of the code. So here's all my code for controller.py. And then for my project.2, or just project 2 rather, I made a code entirely from scratch that is basically just like a functional calculator with basic calculator operations, including a decimal button, with the singular addition of trigonometry. So, in a sense, my two projects are a modified television remote and screen function from an earlier lab, and a completely new calculator function from scratch. So first, I will showcase my project 1 file. Alright, I broke it up into basically like a simulation of a screen of a television on the left, and then all the buttons that would ordinarily be laid out in a TV remote in the same general shape and layout on the right. So you can turn on and off this TV with the power button. The number buttons work for changing the channel. It doesn't need double-digit functionality since the channels only go up to 9. Mute changes the volume to that symbol. Volume up and down function with adjusting volume. And channel up and down also loop back around when it reaches 9 or 1. Much like in the original television file. But the addition of image files indicates that every single channel has an image file in the form of a JPEG that I found online, and they all have an associated channel, basically. Alright, so that is the extent of my project 1. I didn't have a ton of error handling within this one because really there weren't a ton of errors that could occur with the fairly limited functionality of the user only being able to interact with it by pressing the buttons on screen. I accounted for all errors that did emerge simply by adjusting the code later on, but I did not have any like actual error handling, I suppose. Alright, after that I worked on project 2, which was the calculator I made from scratch. Here's a brief rundown of its code as well. I also designed its view.py file from converting from view.ui using the Qt Creator app. And then I made controller.py with all sorts of documentation and methods that make all the buttons on the calculator perform pretty similarly to how a real calculator would perform. So it ended up being quite a few lines long. Alright, here is the main.py file. So each number, first of all, appends onto the number that's currently on screen, stopping when it gets to 7 numbers long so that it doesn't run off screen, because I found that when it was at 8, it would get pretty close to the edge, especially when adding a negative. And you can add numbers, you can subtract them, do all sorts of different operations. Equal sign will give you the result. Alternatively, you can do longhand operations, such as if we do 1, 2, 3 plus 4, 5, 6, and then another addition like plus 7, 8, 9. If we do an equals, it will add up all 3 of those numbers together as opposed to just the 1, because it makes the new first number of the 2-number calculation the result of the first 2 numbers, basically. A lot of that's handled in the back end, and the documentation also explains that a little bit more thoroughly, but that's basically the gist of it. Then the decimal button works to add a decimal onto the end, allowing for float operations as opposed to just integer operations, which makes some of the inputs slightly more complicated, including showing a decimal at the end. And I have it so when the result is displayed, an ellipses is appended onto the end, so that does not run off the screen. But oftentimes you can gain a pretty good feel for what the number actually is just by seeing the first few plus the ... Then the trig functions work pretty smoothly. Just by clicking on one, it immediately performs the calculation. You can also take the cosine of that, and then the tangent. And the way that one works is it just performs basically the calculation in place. so that if I wanted the sign of 0, I would just do 0 sign, and then I can do any operations with that number I like, so +2 maybe. If I want a number where we can actually, I guess, see what's going on better, since the sign of 0 is 0, we could do 0 cosine +1, which should give us 2, and indeed gives us 2. That's about it for the basic functionality of mine. Oh, I also have the clear button, which when you're starting off is fully clear, which just wipes out everything. Or then when you have numbers on screen, it's clear entry, so it only will wipe out that number. So if you do 1 + 5, oh shoot, I meant to press 2. We can do clear entry to make it 3 that it was supposed to be. Whereas, otherwise, if we wanted to clear out every single thing the function had done, we can do 1 + 5 + 6, press clear entry twice to make it clear all, +2, it'll only be 2 since 0 + 2. Then division also works and accounts for 0 division, so if you try and divide something by 0, it will just become an error, and then you can write any numbers to overwrite that. Alright, I believe that is just about all the basic functionality of my Project 1 and Project 2 files, and I really enjoyed this unit. I learned quite a bit from it, including how to be a ton more comfortable with PyQt, as I had to design all those interfaces from scratch after all. I can probably open my app. Yep. I had to do quite a bit of research of like how to actually lay out these apps in the way I was properly intending. I had to do a little bit of research on some methods not covered in class, such as in my TV remote. I had to import from pyqt6.gui to actually get the pix maps to work to import the images. So I had to do a little bit of troubleshooting and stuff online to get different functions in there I was wanting to have in. Another one was Project 2. I needed to import operator to be able to convert strings to operators to make my code a whole lot more succinct. But all this ended up coming together in one pretty cohesive package, or I suppose 2 more cohesive packages would be more correct. But it all used quite a bit of the material we covered in class, plus several material I learned on my own, so I've become a whole lot more familiar with Python as a result. And that's about it. Thank you.